I wanted to go over the last few verses of the 17th chapter again. We moved through them quickly. Last time. It took us a while to get through class. And I thought there was some value in focusing on them. So before we get started, we're going to start on text 23, but before we do that, the 17th chapter has, Krishna finishes the 16th chapter by saying that you should follow the scripture. And I gave multiple elaborate explanations of why following a sacred text, why following a code, why following a treatise, a constitution are essential. Because without having some objective standard, then chaos ensues pretty quickly. And so although we might have separated church and state, really we haven't done that. We might have gotten rid of theocracies, which are based on, just like whatever's said in a book without logic or reason. But looking at universal rights and principles like equal justice for all and so on and so forth, we've established what amount to sacred texts that run our country. And people live and die based on them. We fight wars over them. They are as vital and important to us as any religious text. So anyway, Krishna says follow some sacred text, some authority outside yourself. And then Arjuna says, well, what if I don't, but I still have faith? And that begins a discussion into material religion. Material religion in three flavors. Good material religion, mediocre material religion, and bad material religion. And Krishna goes over the standard features of a religion. The kind of food you eat, the kind of rituals you do, the charity you give, the austerities you perform, things you do, things you don't do, rules, regulations, do's, do nots. He goes through a standard sample list. Charity, austerity, ritual, and food are the four he hits. And the deity you worship. Actually hits 5. And he continually says, the lowest form of these don't follow scripture. And he also does some interesting breakdowns of austerities to mind, body, and words. And, usually the highest expression of something, of material religion, it's uplifting, it follows the scriptures, and it's done somewhat selflessly. But because it's in the mode of sattva, or rajas, or tamas, really, it's material. It's important to understand that even uplifting things can be material. And the Gita teaches that you should be nishtragunya, beyond the 3 gunas. Nirguna, gunatita. You should be beyond the gunas, devoid of the gunas, devoid of the 3 gunas. This teaching comes up again and again. Essentially, you should be spiritual. And so there's a distinction made between sattva, material goodness, and spirituality. And that's relatively easy to understand. Imagine if you were an atheist. Could you be an atheist and go and feed starving children and dig wells and help old ladies cross the street and do lots of secular, humanist, philanthropic work? Would that make you a spiritualist? No, because you could be an atheist and you could be doing it as an atheist. It's interesting, but it's not just what you do, it's why you do it. I don't think this is wrong. I think at a certain point, it's not just what you do, it's also why you do it. Sometimes people leave relationships, even though their partner is doing everything right. There's just like a lacking of heart, a lacking of love, and that's also palpable. Your feelings are significant. how people feel. How do you feel? Okay, you said the right thing, but do you feel the right thing? This breaking down the world into a world of thought and action is the cornerstone of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the cornerstone of covert and overt action. Covert action being thoughts and feelings that then motivate overt action. It's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. There's a gazillion ways that we introduce this into the discussion. That's not just what you do, but it's why you do it. It's not just what you do, but it's who you are and how you think and how you feel. Actually, when establishing a crime, you have to prove intent. It has to be actus reus, the bad act, and there has to be mens rea, the bad mind. And we have different systems for it now. You have to prove, what is it? You have to prove intent, or you have to improve either the person. Premeditation is a different point, but you have to prove purposeful action. Is actually a more favored term now. These older terms are given way to things like purposeful action. Either when you perform an act, you either desired to have a particular bad result, or that you knew that most probably the bad result would ensue. You might not have desired the bad result, but you knew if you drove a car drunk, there was a high probability you were going to kill somebody. And so even though you might not necessarily desire to kill somebody, that recklessness where you knew there was a high likelihood that your action was going to result in something bad happening, that also counts as bad intent, even though there wasn't specific intent. They got a little more sophisticated than just actus, bad action, and bad mind, and now it's a little bit more purposeful action or knowing action, knowing or purposeful action. So they try to define those terms a little more expertly in legal codes. How you think about something is critical. It's actually important. That's why you have to establish motive. It has to be a reason for something to occur. Anyway, there's a bunch of things like this. But the point is that how you think is also a critical factor. So all the things that Krishna's described thus far, the good stuff, the stuff that's in sattva, the good religion, it's still not necessarily indicative of a deep, profound spiritual faith. Do you follow this? He does use the word shraddha in some places. He uses the word, not following the Shastras or following the Shastras. But there is a sense, if something is in sattva or rajas or tamas, it's material. And this is difficult for the devotees to wrap their heads around because most of the time stuff in sattva sounds spiritual. But it's pious, albeit not spiritual. And so what Krishna has to do at some point in this chapter is he has to bump the hump from goodness to pure goodness, from goodness to a fourth stage, Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness, or Nishtraigunya, beyond the three modes, including goodness, Turiya, the fourth stage of existence. There has to be this transcendence element. And so the last part of this chapter is dedicated to explaining how those actions in the mode of goodness can be performed in such a way that they actually become spiritual. They become truly religious, truly spiritual, as opposed to just religious in form or in name. Do you follow this? You could imagine. You could have somebody, they go to church. Just think it through. You go to church, you say your prayers, you receive communion, you confess your sins, you show up to do your rituals, and the distinction between that and someone who actually is transformed by the passion, by the suffering of Christ, by the ritual of baptism, and undergoes a rebirth and becomes reborn, picks up the cross and follows Jesus, and really undergoes an internal change of heart. And now they do all the same stuff the first guy did, or the first girl did. They go to church and do this and that. But instead of it being because my parents told me to go, or because I feel good when I go, or because I feel guilty when I don't go, it becomes because I love God and I want to do it for the right reason. Does that make sense? Okay. So, that is what the last part of this chapter gets into. And so we have Om Tat Sat Iti Nirdesha. This designation, Om Tat Sat. Brahmanas Trividha Smritaha. This is remembered to be the threefold. This is understood to be the threefold designation for Brahman. Om Tat Sat is a 3-word designation for spirit. Brahmanas Tena Vedascha Yagyascha Vihita Pura. And yagya, sacrifice, religious actions, were arranged in the past by the Brahmanas and the Vedas with this symbolic representation. In the past, priests and our sacred texts arranged for rituals to also include the chanting of Om Tat Sat, which introduced spirit into the equation. Do you guys follow this? Tasmat Om Iti Udahritya. Therefore, chanting Om, Yagya Dan Tapakriya Pravartate Vedanokta. Therefore, Brahmavadina Satatam. Therefore, those who know Brahman, they always arranged or prescribed Om to be chanted at the beginning of any yagya dan tapakriya, of any ritual, of any austerity, of any sacrifice, of any charity. In other words, the 4 things we just described, you should chant Om before you do it. Why? Why? It what? It links it up with spirit, yeah. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You start off, right? There's some invocation. There's some spiritualizing. You're stating at the beginning. So Om performed that. Om accomplished that. Interestingly, Om is a fairly generic spiritual term. In Sanskrit, it's used by many, many schools of Hinduism, perhaps not all, but certainly it's extremely popular. And so Krishna's being fairly ecumenical here. He's being pretty universalist here. So there was a way that you would take that good act and make it a great act. There was a way you would take that good material act and make it a great spiritual act. And that was you would chant Om at the beginning, which was a way to invoke spirit and remind you of why you were doing it and purify the atmosphere. And that was a way of bringing God's presence or a spiritual presence into what would otherwise be an uplifting material performance. Did you guys follow that? I mean, just imagine if you went to like a symphony or an opera. I mean, I have no attraction for symphonies or operas. I've never been to a symphony. I've never been to an opera in my life. Nor do I have any desire. Like, I also haven't drunk toilet water ever in my life, and I'm not like feeling like I'm missing out or something. There's all sorts of stuff I've never done, and I have no intention of doing it ever in my life. And so operas and symphonies are in that category for me. And the most I ever did was I went to go see a play or something like that, or God forbid a musical my parents dragged me to or something like that at the local theater. But even that made me want to poke my eyes out. And so I'm traumatized from occasional trips to the theater as a kid. And so I have no desire to like go big, you know? So, but imagine if you went to the symphony, if that was your thing, or you went to the opera, that was your thing. And at the outset of the performance, the composer came up and said, I wrote this as an offering to God. And so as you're listening to music, please understand that this was written by me for religious purposes to glorify God. Even you hear things like Gregorian chants, which are pretty cool, or Vedic chants or something like that, and then you know that there was a spiritual reason for it. It was being done by religious people, and you get it. That's there. It's woven into the fabric of what's going on. There, just like if you look at like a Salvador Dali painting or a Van Gogh painting, you see their trippiness and their mental disturbance in the art. When people make art, something of their mindset, their purpose, their passion, their thought goes into what they create. So you could imagine if somebody at the outset of a performance said this was done for religious reasons, this was done spiritually, this was done for the pleasure of God, what you're hearing is my offering to God. It changes the atmosphere a little bit. You follow? It's going to make you a little less likely to treat. You're going to be a little more perceptive, a little more pious, a little more thoughtful, a little more deep, a little more introspective as you're then witnessing that thing because the person's told you what it is. There's a song, I think it's called Tears in Heaven. You know that song? It's a song written by Eric Clapton. Where were you born? Yeah. In Kenya. Okay. East India. Okay. Nairobi? Okay. I've been to Nairobi twice. Knowing the song clearly indicates to me that you were not born in India, despite your complexion. So I thought England. Kenya's, almost England. Not quite. A little more Indian than England, but less than, let's say, Mauritius. It's somewhere in between Mauritius and England, maybe favoring England. There's a whole diaspora Indian population all over the world. So super close to India is a country like Mauritius, which is in the Indian Ocean, halfway between India and Africa, closer to Africa. But the population is almost entirely Indian. Hindi is the national tongue, and even the black people there speak Hindi. Then you get East Africa, because Africa's not that far away from India, and there's trade that went on there. So you got like Uganda and Nairobi, big, and South Africa, and there's huge Indian population in those countries. Then you kind of come around and you get to the Caribbean, and you get Trinidad and Guyana, and you get these countries have a very large Indian population, diaspora Indian population. They've been living there for hundreds of years, but originally those people were hailing from India. Those people are super westernized, minimally Hindu. The further away you get from the motherland, the more westernized people become. And then you can go up, you get to England. That's another route. So going across the Atlantic, you go up and get to England. Of course, England and India had just a tremendous relationship for many years. And so anyway, people born in these different places have different degrees. You can go to the other side too. It's the whole Indian population in Thailand. In Hong Kong, there's a whole, you can go that way too. And they spread out in all these directions and for trade and business and what have you. Get down south to Indonesia. Garuda Airlines was the official airlines of Indonesia. It's called Garuda Airlines. You know, like if you go get tattoos, traditional Thai tattoos, it's Hanuman, Garuda, or Sudarshan Chakra. Those are your choices or a temple. If you've ever seen their tattoo style, it's this like really. They bathe the tattoo. They do an abhishek of the tattoo, and they chant mantras all the tattoo you. And then when they're done, they bathe your tattoo as a deity, and they install a deity on you with an abhishek. It's close to India, you know. Cambodia, the biggest Hindu temple in the world, Angkor Wat, was a Vishnu temple during the Khmer regime when Cambodia ruled all the way from Myanmar to Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. The whole thing was ruled by Vaishnava kings. Anyway, so Tears in Heaven. Eric Clapton's kid fell out of a window as an infant in the late 90s, I believe it was, and died, fell to his death. And he wrote the song. So I know the story, so whenever I hear the song, I cry. Because I know the story behind the song. He stopped performing it. He did it for a few years. He seems like a kind of a jerky guy. Stole George Harrison's girl. Was kind of a jerk. But whatever. But he wrote this song as some kind of therapy when his son died, fell to his death. And you hear it and you listen to the lyrics of the song, and if you know what the song's about, it's a tearjerker. Because once you make that connection of what he's talking about, it creates some emotion. So this idea of, setting an intention. What am I doing? What's the purpose of this? What's this really all about? It's a powerful thing to do when you start something, at the outset of something. Pravartante means at the beginning of, when you begin something. Pravartante vidanokta, brahmavadina satatam. The Brahmins, they prescribe the chanting of Om at the beginning of any dan, kriya, yagya, tapa. At the beginning of any austerity, sacrifice, charity, or ritual. The four things. But now what you're doing is you're chanting Om at the beginning of it, which is a name for God, a very generic name for God. Let's say Om is like saying Creator. We hold these truths to be self-evident that our Creator has created all men equally. It's a very generic term, chosen so as not to offend the Jews and Christians and Muslims and whatever other religions were around. Creator. Om's even more generic than Creator. Creator would be Ishwar. Controller, Ishwar. Creator. Vishnu means the enterer, which means the maintainer in the sense of entering into everything. Krishna says, Srijami, I create, I bring forth. So, there's no even anyway, you get kind of a cyclic time thing. Things are eternal. They've never been created. They've always existed. Therefore, the idea of a linear time and creation that took place at some point in time is more of a Western concept in the way they view time. Therefore, creator isn't such a popular term. But controller is. Ordainer, controller, like that. So it's Om is even more generic than that. It's just a spiritual sound. Right? It'd be almost like saying, I don't know, if you say it's almost like let's observe a moment of silence at the beginning of this. If you're trying to think of what a Western equivalent would be, it's almost that generic. I'd like to offer, my respect to, that higher power, that higher truth, that higher principle. That would be maybe the closest you get, something like an AA type thing. It's not even as defined as the term creator, which we use in our own legal codes. So there's a threefold designation, Om Tat Sat. And from the very beginning, spiritual or religious actions were arranged with that in mind. And therefore, at the beginning of any religious act, you were supposed to chant Om to purify it, to turn it into an offering. You follow? Tat iti anabhisandhaya palam yagya tapa kriya dan kriyascha vividha kriyante moksha kangshivi. By those desiring liberation. By those desiring liberation. They would say Tat when performing any yagya, tapa, kriya, dan. So when performing one of those, vivida, or any of these various rituals, those desiring liberation would say Tat and anabhisandaya palam, and they wouldn't desire the fruit. So the word Tat, which literally means that, Om, that. So, Om, that, Om Tat Sat, Om, that is Sat. Om, that, Om is Sat. Om, that ritual, Om is that ritual. Om, the ritual is for that. You follow? So there's like kind of two ways to think about it. Om Tat Sat is straight. Om, that is real. So if that Om is real, then what's not real? Huh? Everything else. Om, that's real. What's not real? All the other stuff that you're freaked out about. Om, that's real. Om, that's good. Om, that's true. Om, that's beautiful. Those are all good translations of Sat. Om, this ritual, this performance, this austerity, this thing I'm doing. Like imagine, for instance, if you decide you're going to be celibate. Let's go with celibacy. It's like a tough one, tough nut for people to crack, but definitely on the table. You guys know who the Proud Boys are? Right-wing conservative group wears yellow and black polo shirts from what's that company? Fred Perry shirts. They wear orange and black, yellow and black Fred Perry shirts. Are you guys like fools? Do you know who the Proud Boys are? Just like idiots, never just like on Instagram all day, never actually look at the news, ever? There's a group of right-wing conservatives called the Proud Boys who were Trump sycophants who were involved in the... Did you guys ever hear of the September 6th or the January 6th Capitol riots? You morons? Okay, the Proud Boys were like some of those guys. I'm bewildered how you guys could not know this. It's like, do you know who Donald Trump is? Like, no. It's like, they asked Donald Trump about the Proud Boys during the presidential debates. And he said, stand back and stand ready, or something like that, which they saw as a massive endorsement. And with the Proud Boys, you're not supposed to masturbate to be a Proud Boy, like to be a member of their group. That's one of their rules. There you go. Like when you're like supposed to be as moral as the Capitol rioters, as moral as. Also, another one of the rules is you have to win a fight or get arrested at one of their actions. So you have to get into a fight at one of their rallies, which is really a riot, or get arrested at one of their riots. And that's also a membership thing. So you can't masturbate, and you got to get arrested. It's like a stop clock is right twice a day. Right? It's like your clock says 1:05 and it just doesn't work, then twice a day your clock's actually right. So this group of, and then of course their founder was found out to be an FBI informant, and it's a whole thing. But this group of, super mediocre people from a moral viewpoint, even they figured this one out. So celibacy is it's kind of a standard, benchmark of a self-controlled human being, an adult, somebody who's, learned how to control their senses on some level. Right? Of course, I don't know where I've gone now. You guys totally spun me by your lack of knowing cultural reference, but I don't know why I was bringing this up in the first place. Anybody? Huh? Yeah, I know I was talking about celibacy because I just said that. I'm trying to figure out how it was connected to the rest of my class.
We were talking about.
Now I know. So, let's say you're struggling to be celibate. Of course, there's a whole thing with this, a whole game you got to play with people where if you tell them to do something, then they freak out, and the more they feel like stuff's riding on, the more pressure it puts on them, and the more likely they are to slip up. So it's a bit of a razor's edge. You want to pressure people, but not so much that they feel like if they fall down, it's all gonna be destroyed. Actually, it's funny, but the founder of the Proud Boys said, I don't know what the word they use for masturbating is. It's like FAP or something like that. They have some name. I don't think it's FAP. They have another name they use for it. But he said, we don't masturbate except for once a month. And actually, when I read that, I actually thought, this guy's got some good PR people. Because if you say we don't do it at all, then when people mess up, they can't be a member of your tribe. You follow? But you say we only do it once a month, and it means okay, if I slip up once in a while, I can still be a part of the team. Do you follow? It's a super carefully constructed battle cry. Because it sets a bar, but it doesn't set a bar that if you fall down from that you're automatically out. Does that make sense? Otherwise, a bunch of 16-year-old wannabe Proud Boys would be like, I got to find a new group to be a member of. I can't pull this off. And so, anyway, when I was reading this, I thought, wow, somebody thought this through. They had a good marketing team or a good PR team. They had some kind of good publicity team working with them. But you can imagine if you're trying to be celibate or sober or whatever it might be. And you decided, I'm going to do this as my offering to God. I'm doing this not just for myself, not just for my family, but it's actually my way of connecting with divinity. I'm going to chant my japa to connect with Krishna. It's my vow to Krishna. It's how I connect with Krishna. I'm going to follow these rules to connect with Krishna. I'm going to give charity, and this is my way of showing you I love you, Krishna. If you can do that, if you can connect what you're doing as an offering to Krishna, and you feel that this is the way you show your love for Krishna, the strength that you get is orders of magnitude more than if you're just doing it for somebody else or for yourself or to actually connect it. Like I said, if people are super immature and you tell them don't do this, they're like, and they freak out. So I don't mean like that. I mean you actually matured a little bit and you're able to hold some space. But if you're able to connect, I'm doing this for you, Krishna. This is my offering to you. This is how I show my love to you. Your empowerment, your strength, your fortitude, your resolve, your resilience will increase by several orders of magnitude. You'll have hundreds of times more strength. Did you guys follow that? So Om, that Om is real, right? Om, this thing I'm doing is for that. It's for Om. Does that make sense? I like both these ways of analyzing Om Tat Sat because literally if you said Om Tat Sat as a sentence, it's Om, that is real. It's actually a sentence. It self-forms a sentence. It's, and the predicates are implied. Om, that is real. Works as an actual sentence. Do you follow this? But then Om also relates to, or Tat also relates to Tat and Etat. That and this. And that is further away. And so Om, this ritual is for that. You follow? I'm looking at that. I'm interested in that. And that different way of understanding Om Tat Sat works with the verse in question because the verse says, Anabhisandhaya balam. You're not trying to enjoy the fruit. You're not thinking about the fruit. Rather, moksha kangshi, you're desiring liberation. So the verse that we're reading says the person desires liberation. Liberation is aiming at, You get it? And not wanting the fruit is not wanting, you see? I'm not asking for the fruits. I'm not asking for, but instead I'm aiming at, you get it? That's liberation. This is the fruit. So although Om Tat Sat works as a straight sentence, also from the way Krishna describes it in this chapter, the idea of pointing your consciousness towards that instead of this. And therefore the ritual is for that purpose. And you're trying to use this to get there. You get it? It works really well. Do you guys follow this? So I see two distinct ways of reading this. Om Tat Sat, Om, that is real. If that is real, what's unreal? Everything else, this. You get it? So I'm placing a value on something higher. But now I'm doing my ritual, and as I do my ritual, I got a few things going on. I say Om at the beginning, and Om is a designation for God. It's actually a threefold designation for God. But the word Tat literally means that, and the word Sat means real, and so Om amongst the three words is the most deity-oriented word. So Om means God, and so Om, that is real. Om, when I start, and then I say Tat, and I don't want this. I want that. So it almost redirects you. It's also a way of thinking about Om, that's the real thing, that's the important thing, that's the thing you should be focused on. But it's also a way of focusing you. I'm not for here, I'm for there. And it's also focusing on the action that you're undertaking, that this action is for moving me in that direction, not moving me in this direction. Are you guys with me? That made sense, right? Did you follow this? It makes sense, doesn't it? I'm trying to break it down for you guys so you get it. We're looking at three words, they're not super complicated. We should be able to nail this. Sat bhave sadhu bhave cha sat iti etat prayujate. The word sat is used in the sense of sat and sadhu. Sadhu means good. So the word sat is used to mean good, and it's also used to mean sat. And I mentioned this before, that Krishna would be a poor lexicographer. Lexicographers make dictionaries. Why would Krishna be a poor? Is it lexicographer? Which one is it? Lexicographer. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with my gut on that one. It is, right? It rolls better, doesn't it? Why is Krishna a bad lexicographer? Because he uses the word he's defining in the definition. If I say the meaning of good is good, is that a good definition? That's a lousy definition. You're not allowed to do that. You got to have at least 2 or 3 steps. Good means something which is right. Right means something which is proper. Proper means something which is good. You have 2 or 3 steps before you revert back to the original word you used in an average dictionary. So people can read the dictionary and get some sense of the word you're using that does not depend on them knowing the word that they're asking about. You guys following this? But Krishna says sat is used in the sense of sat. So sat as a noun in Sanskrit means good, true, beautiful, right, proper, spiritual, existent, real. It has all those really primary meanings, and contextually you figure out which meaning is most likely intended.
Does it mean eternal as well?
Yeah. If something's real, what's the realest thing? What's the realest thing? Something's really real, what is it? It's eternal. It's perennially true. It's perennially there. Therefore, it's really real. So yes, sat means really real too. Eternal, sure. Absolute, it's got a bunch of different meanings. So, sat is used in the sense of good or real. Okay? Prashaste karmanitata. And it also is used about a praiseworthy act. So if you do something which is laudable or respectable or praiseworthy or deserving of some accolade, you'll also say sadhu, sat. It's very common. You'll say sadhu. When somebody does something really good, you go sadhu, sadhu. That's like the word sat. It's being used in the sense of bravo, good job, something like that. Well done. So the word sat is used to mean real, it's used to mean good, and it's also used when you do something praiseworthy. Sat shabda partha yujate. It's used. The word sat is used when you do something praiseworthy. So the word sat means good or real, and it's also used when somebody does something praiseworthy. Yagya tapas dane cha stiti sat iti cha uchate. And if you're steady in your performance of yagya, tapas, and dan, in your performance of ritual, charity, austerity, if you're steady in that, that's also called sat. You follow? You now become sat. This also supports the idea of seeing sat as relating to us as well as God, as well as the act. Do you follow? I'm looking at different ways of looking at the 3 words Om Tat Sat. Om Tat Sat, just a straight sentence. Om, that is real. Om, that is real. In fact, the word that is cognate to the word tat in Sanskrit. Om, that is real. But now we can say, Om, that, I want that, I'm headed towards that, I'm desiring liberation, moksha kankshi. I'm not desiring this world. Therefore, I'm anabhisandhaya palam. I'm not aiming towards the fruit in this world, but I'm aiming towards that. So that is also relevant for me. And it's also relevant for the act itself, because the act itself is for that, not for this world, not for me, it's for that. Idam Krishnaya, idam namama. This is for Krishna, this is not mine. You say that when you do a yajna. Idam Krishnaya, idam namama, idam Vishnave, idam namama. This is for Vishnu, this is not mine. This is for Krishna, this is not mine. Idam, this, na, not, mama, mine. Idam Krishnaya, this is for Krishna. Idam Vishnave, this is for Vishnu. This is not for me. So, I'm liking the phrase as a reference to the act, to ourselves, and to God. Om, that is real. Om, this ritual is for that purpose. And that's good. That's real. That's praiseworthy. That's laudable. You follow? Om, I'm looking towards that. And that's also, my steadiness in that is also Sat. Do you see this? So, what I'm doing is I'm being super interpretive with the words Om Tat Sat. But I'm interpreting it based on what Krishna is giving me in the Gita. And so because the word Sat is used for prashaste karmani, a laudable act, and it's also stiti dhane, tape, tapasi, yagye. When you're steady in your performance of those rituals, then it's described as Sat. So now I'm using Krishna's own usage of the language and showing us how it can refer to both the act, the person, as well as the deity. And I'm applying the phrase Om Tat Sat to all three because Krishna's encouraging me to do so by his multivalent language, which is giving you different possible definitions. Did you guys follow that? Om, that is real. What's that about? That's about God. That's about Om, right? Om, that is real. Om is God. Om, that is real. What's real? Om is. You follow? Om, this ritual is for that purpose, not this purpose, not for some mundane fruit, but for liberation, and that's good. That's now applying Om Tat Sat to the ritual, the act, the charity, the tapasya, the austerity, the charity, the ritual, right? Om, I'm looking at that. I'm moksha kankshi. I'm looking for liberation. I'm not looking at this. I'm anabhisandhaya palam. I'm not looking for the fruit. Not trying to enjoy this world. And that steadiness in my focus on that higher truth is good. Now who's Om Tat Sat referring to? You see that? The actual verses themselves give you this multivalent understanding of the term. You following this? Okay. Karma chaiva tat artiyam sat iti. Evabhidiyate. It's part.
No, he's muted.
Just mute everybody. Oh, it's Shay. Okay. It's all right. It's fine. No biggie. Happy you're here, Shay. Don't worry about it. Rah! Karma chaiva tat artiyam sat iti evabhidiyate. An action which is for that purpose. Action which is for that purpose. In other words, even if it's not yajna, dan, tapa, kriya, rituals, austerities, charity, and sacrifice, even if it's just other actions you're conducting in your life that are headed towards that, are supportive of that, are being dovetailed to that, or are leading to that, that's also called sat. So now it's not just the praiseworthy act, it's not just the steadiness in the act, it's not just in the sense of good or real, it's also when you're living a life and you're doing attendant activities which are supportive. For instance, just to give you an example, sorry, it's the one I came up with. You guys know who Tyson Fury is? You're a bunch of losers. He's the heavyweight champion of the world, one of the most greatest boxers in a generation. A 6'9" English gypsy. Describes himself, he's called himself the Gypsy King. The word gypsy is a derogatory term which nobody should ever use. Unless the guy you're talking to goes, I'm the Gypsy King. Then you go, he's the Gypsy King, and it's not wrong. So that's his handle, the Gypsy King, on Instagram. So the reason why gypsy is derogatory. First of all, you know how you ever say, don't gyp me? He tried to Jew me down on the price. It's derogatory towards Jewish people. Don't gyp me? It's derogatory towards gypsies. Romany people. Who actually originally hailed from India. Who originally came from India and were part of traveling caravans that came from India. And were artistes from India that traveled all over the ancient world. A lot of people think they come from Romania, but that was sort of a stopping point. But the general understanding, and I believe it's also been proven genetically. It goes back to Indian blood. Anyway, one of the reasons why it's derogatory is gypsies, because they thought they were from Egypt. Because people were just stupid and they were kind of dark skinned. They're like, oh, you must be from Egypt. I don't know why they didn't call them, Moroccans or something like that, but somehow they came up with that they were from Egypt. And so that's where the term gypsy comes from. It's a misnomer. Anyway, Tyson Fury, I saw a video of him today with his dad. His dad was a bare-knuckle gypsy fighter, who actually fought in illegal bare-knuckle fights. Also a mountain of a man, also a pro boxer. Poked a guy's eye out in 2011. like not that long ago. Got into a fight and actually took a guy's eye out. Like the guy's missing an eye now and is blind in one eye. I went to jail for 4 years because of it. See, like Tyson Fury is a gypsy. He's legitimately from a criminal clan of gypsy bare-knuckle fighters who are going to prison for poking people's eyes out. Google it. I saw a video of him on Instagram today, because that's all I do. And his dad was standing over him with a big medicine ball, throwing it into Tyson Fury's stomach. Over and over again. When he laid on the ground, he kept throwing this big, heavy medicine ball in his stomach. And then he turned on his side. I've never seen this before. And throwing it on his side. I've never seen that one done before. I've seen it on the stomach a million times. But to see it done on your side, hitting your obliques with the medicine ball, that was kind of brutal to see. And so, that's not boxing. But it's conditioning. They have you do the combine for the NFL, where you squat and you run the 40 and you do a vertical jump, and then you also do a bench press to decide who's going to get, the draft pick. They look at your combine scores, which is a measure of your raw athletic ability. That's not the same as playing football, but it's supportive. If you're good at all that stuff and you have a high degree of speed and strength versus your weight ratio, and you have a high degree of physicality as determined by your ability to vertically leap in the air, which is a really traditional measure of raw athletic ability, then they know you're going to be a good football player. So anytime you're doing anything, there's the action that you're doing or you're training for or that you're going to perform. But then there's supplementary things that you do on a regular basis to help you become a better person. That's why we follow the Four Noble Principles. So we can really focus on Krishna. So we can really live a spiritual life. So we're not victimized by our senses. So that we don't become functionally stupefied by our material desires that rule our actions. There's plenty of, celibate, miserable atheists in the world. There's plenty of sober, miserable materialists in the world. There's plenty of vegan jerks in the world. These things by themselves do not make you a good person. But they're certainly supportive of what we're trying to achieve. And so even Krishna's so kind of broad-minded and ecumenical and thoughtful that he even includes in what's considered sat all the other things you can do which are designed to get you to that ritual, to get you to that austerity. You follow? All those supplementary lifestyle choices you make are now also called sat. So it's not just the activity, but it's even the activities that support the activity. So now the term sat can now refer to God, you, the actions you're undertaking, and then the supportive supplementary precursor actions you're taking. All of it's included within sat. Do you follow this? So to wrap it up, Om, that is real, is a sentence about God, referred to as, there you go. Om, I don't want this fruit of my action. I want that fruit of liberation. That goal is valuable, real, true, beautiful. Right? Now what's Om Tat Sat about? It's about me. I don't want this fruit. I want that liberation. That's real. Who's Om Tat Sat about? It's about me. Om, this ritual is actually meant for that purpose. That's the true purpose or the real purpose of the ritual. Now Om Tat Sat is about the ritual. You follow? And then even the supportive activities that are helping you to perform the good actions you want to perform. The supportive, the general conditioning, general physical preparedness, right? Your GPP, your general work that you're doing to get yourself ready for whatever your contest is. That stuff also gets looped in as supportive, and therefore that also becomes sat. This is Krishna's methodology through mantra of purifying materially pious activities and making them spiritual. You follow that? From the beginning of creation, the three words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmanas while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme. Therefore, transcendentalists undertaking performances of sacrifice, charity, and penance in accordance with scriptural regulations begin always with Om to attain the Supreme. Without desiring fruitive results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity with the word Tat. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. The absolute truth is the objective of devotional sacrifice and is indicated by the word Sat. The performance of such sacrifice is also called Sat, as are all works of sacrifice, penance, and charity, which, true to the absolute nature, are performed to please the Supreme Person. Anything done in sacrifice, charity, or penance without faith in the Supreme is impermanent. It's called asat, not sat. And it is useless both in this life and the next. So what happens is the chapter starts off with the idea of Shraddha, faith, and how faith mixes with adherence to a scriptural tradition. And Krishna spends most of the chapter really trying to guide us in the direction of Scripture, to show how Scripture helps us bump the hump and turn something material into something spiritual. But at the end of the day, Krishna starts the chapter by saying, you are your faith. At the end of the chapter, he says, if you do something without faith, it's useless. It's asat. That'd be another meaning of asat, useless. And so what you're left with is you have to do the right thing in accordance with some objective standard of behavior that goes beyond your whim, and you have to do it for the right reason with a good heart. And so Krishna ultimately refuses to separate those two things. He glorifies both of them, but really puts them together progressively through the chapter. So that even if you start off with one without the other, he wants to get you to a place where you're walking and chewing gum, where you're doing the right thing for the right reason, where you're living a life of virtue and you're doing it for the right reason. And so you see this, it's like Krishna kind of saunters through the chapter and plays around with the idea of separating them and looks at where that might wind up on the sattva, rajas, and tamas metric of goodness, passion, and ignorance, but ultimately brings it all back together, links it back up with the Shastra, which in addition to giving you an objective standard, also introduces spirituality into the equation in a formal way. And Om Tat Sat was one traditional way that was done. Thank you, IGTV. You could stay on Facebook if you wanted. Give me some feedback.